How's it going, everybody? My name is Philip, and today I'm going to be reacting to something that's been requested twice. I've been meaning to do this, and I just haven't done it yet, so I'm definitely getting around to it now. This is Fighting Without a Country's Czechoslovak. Blah, blah, blah. I am so sorry. It's Czechoslovak, which is interesting because I'm used to hearing Czechoslovakia, so it's interesting to know that it's not Czechoslovakia. Maybe I've been saying it wrong this whole time. Or maybe this is the older version, because you know how countries always change and things happen, and this definitely says Legions of World War One, so it might be Czechoslovakia and Slovakia. No, because the Czech Republic. So I think Czechoslovakia was what it was originally, and then it to the Czech Republic, and then Slovakia changed. Right? Is that right? Like they broke apart or something like that, and then there's the Czech Republic now, and then Slovakia. I'm kind of hoping it goes over that in this video, because I'm not 100% sure. For some reason, I want to say Czechoslovakia, but it's saying Czechoslovak. So listen, I'm an American. We don't know shit about the world. As much as we pretend like we do, for the most younger adults that have not looked into it, don't know jack shit. Just gonna throw that out there right now. So definitely gonna be interesting to learn about this. I've been doing a lot of historical videos recently, and it's been a lot of fun to learn about different histories or the history of different countries and all this. So let's get into this. Is just part one. So let's get into part one of Fighting Without a Country. As always, you can watch the original video down in the link in the description down below, and let's check them out.
And without their own country, living split up among not one, but two mighty empires. But when the Great War came and those empires began to crumble, those men took up arms in the struggle and fought so that one day they too would have their own nation. These were the men of the Czechoslovak legions.
The Great War
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to a Great War special episode about the Czechoslovak legions. First, I have to say that this is not about Czechs and Slovaks during and before the war and how their nation came to be. That is a topic for another day. This is about those men actually fighting the war and how the legions themselves came to be.
Okay.
Who were these men? Well, they were Czechs and Slovaks fighting in France, Italy, Russia, and even volunteering in Serbia. Why legion? Since Czechoslovakia did not yet exist, these volunteers, not allowed to fight in the regular armies, fought in units that were officially part of the French Foreign Legion. That's who also paid them. Going back a bit and changing sides, the Czech situation within the Austro-Hungarian Empire was not ideal before the war. They hadn't got the recognition that Hungary did, even though they were the industrial heart of the empire and its third largest nationality, and the largest Slavic one, and Slavs were half the empire. The Bohemian crown lands were actually as well developed as Germany or France were, unlike much of Austria-Hungary.
That's beautiful.
So morale was fairly low among the Czechs when the war broke out. And of course, the outbreak of war meant that soon they were fighting fellow Slavs and even Czechs and Slovaks in Entente nations. Those men in those Entente nations weren't yet Czechoslovak legions, but they're worth mentioning. Those volunteers in Serbia, the Rota Nazdar in France, and the Česká Družina in Russia. There were a few Czech volunteers in the Serbian army from the beginning of the war, but by the 1916 reorganization of that army, there were hundreds of them, including many officers. Rota Nazdar was formed already August 31st, 1914 in France, though recruitment had begun a week earlier. It consisted of 314 Czech and 2 Slovak volunteers, who became an integrated company in a Moroccan division of the French Foreign Legion.
Moroccan division? So, like, they had to go to Morocco, or just was what it was called? I mean, that, because obviously I've heard of, like, I guess France, I guess like colonized or something like that, a country or a couple countries in Africa, and so when World War II happened or something like that, maybe it was World War I that I'm thinking of, But when one of the world wars happened, they called upon that country to come fight for them, and they weren't too happy because they didn't want to fight for a country that they've never officially have ever been in or visited or something like that. I do remember that, and I don't remember if that was because of Battlefield 1 or Battlefield 5 that I remember hearing that. But it was something like that. It's weird. It's weird. Yeah, anyways.
Who became an integrated company in a Moroccan division of the French Foreign Legion.
Yeah.
In June 1915 at Arras, they suffered huge casualties, and the company was disbanded and dispersed among other Foreign Legion regiments. However, they had laid the foundations for independent Czechoslovak armed forces. Over the next couple of years, Tomáš Masaryk, future Czechoslovakian president, and General Milan Stefanik began to organize Czech and Slovak troops in France. In addition to this, whole units reported from Russia and Romania, and American Czechs and Slovaks began arriving in 1917. French President Raymond Poincaré signed a decree that allowed autonomous Czechoslovakian units within the French army in December 1917. And the 21st and 22nd Rifle Regiments were soon established, forming the 1st Czechoslovak Brigade, which fought over the summer of 1918 on the Western Front. In Italy, the situation was different. The Italian army did not easily warm to the idea of Czechoslovak legions. Before the war, there had only been a few hundred Czechs and Slovaks living in Italy anyhow, far fewer than were in France or Russia. See, for Italy, to commit to the formation of a Czechoslovak legion would mean committing to the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And initially, Italy only wanted land from Austria-Hungary, not the end of the empire. Still, many of the POWs Italy took were Czechs and Slovaks. And by January 1917, there were Italian POW camps by nationality. And that month, the Czechoslovakian Corps of Volunteers was created, led by brother Josef Čapek. These men were at first used as scouts for the Italian army, indeed for all of the armies in which they served. Since they spoke German or Hungarian, they knew Austro-Hungarian tactics. They were great for gathering intelligence, though they didn't have autonomous units in Italy until after the Italian defeat at Caporetto and intense negotiations by General Stefanik. In April 1918, Czechoslovakian military forces in Italy were approved. By the end of the summer, there were over 13,000 soldiers and over 480 officers in the Legion there.
Wow.
And the division saw heavy fighting at the front. Just after the war, the Czechoslovakian Army Corps in Italy was formed to fight for its new nation's territorial integrity. Also, the Czechoslovakian National Guard was created there from former POWs just after an independent Czechoslovakia was recognized. It was 60,000 troops strong, still going home in 1919. Now, in Russia, over 100,000 Czechs and Slovaks were already living there before the war. Many had Russian citizenship. At the very beginning of the war, those who wished to fight against Austria-Hungary formed Česká družina, which would become the base for the future legion there. They never operated as a whole unit and were tasked with small attacks, getting enemy information, and convincing Czechs and Slovaks on the battlefield and in POW camps to change sides. There were also hundreds of Czech and Slovak volunteers in the Serb Volunteer Corps in Odessa. They wore Serbian uniforms and were under Serbian regulations. By 1916, since the Serbs had no plans for the Czechoslovakian troops to have independent units, a majority of them left to join the Czechoslovak Rifle Brigade that formed in the Russian army that May. They wanted independent units with the belief that fighting for the Allies would get them support for their national aspirations. The problem with that had been that those who were still, say, legally Austro-Hungarian citizens were breaking the 1907 Hague Convention and were technically traitors. The Tsar, in particular, though he appreciated their bravery, saw them as traitors to a brother monarch and was a supporter of the Hague Convention, hence his hesitation to have volunteer forces of foreign nationals in his army. Masaryk argued that just the willingness to fight against the Central Powers demonstrated loyalty, and that since the Central Powers used poison gas and unrestricted submarine warfare, the Hague Convention was broken anyhow, and the Entente could legally use Czechoslovakian soldiers against their former nations.
Okay.
The greatest moment for the Czechoslovak legions advancing their cause was the fighting of the 1st Czechoslovak Rifle Brigade at the Battle of Zborov in July 1917. 3,500 men under Russian Colonel Troyanov were in the trenches holding a 6-kilometer line opposite a force of largely Czechs and Slovaks in the Austro-Hungarian army. On July 2nd, the second day of the new Kerensky offensive, the Legionnaires attacked as shock troops. They breached the barbed wire, advanced deep into enemy territory, and took 4 lines of trenches, 3,300 prisoners, and 20 big guns that day. Now, that's about as many prisoners as their whole unit's size.
Damn.
Legion losses for the day were just 167 killed and around 900 wounded.
Okay.
This battle meant little for the war in general, but was a real milestone in Legion history. The brigade gained international attention, and the battle did wonders for new recruiting and for Masaryk's negotiating position. An enlargement of the brigade followed, and by October 1917, the Czechoslovak Army Corps was formed with 2 divisions and 2 artillery brigades. There were so many volunteers, they even had a reserve brigade and a shock battalion. Soon, Masaryk had set up an autonomous Czechoslovakian corps of more than 50,000 soldiers. This was declared part of the autonomous Czechoslovakian army, headquartered in France in February 1918. However, the Russian Legion was going to have a hard time making its way to Western Europe. Ukraine signed a peace treaty with the Central Powers February 9th, and after Russia did the following month, it was too dangerous for the Legion to head to Archangel or Murmansk in the north. They couldn't go west or south without reaching enemies, so they had to head east. This would mean crossing Siberia to reach Vladivostok, and then around the world to fight in France. The Bolsheviks wanted to disarm the soldiers, though Joseph Stalin, the chief Russian negotiator, drafted an agreement by which they were civilians that could carry some weapons as self-defense. Still, at every train station on the long route, the Bolsheviks tried to demand more and more weapons from the Legionnaires. And there, I'll leave you hanging.
Damn
for the
you.
Tale of the Czechoslovak Legion crossing Russia, the uprising at Chelyabinsk, Trotsky's manipulations to capture them and turn them into the Central Powers, the liberation of Siberian cities by the Legion, the fighting together with the White Russians, the action on Lake Baikal, the machinations of the Allies to keep them in Russia and hopefully reopen the Eastern Front, and the ultimate evacuation are a tale for another special, which we will 100% do, and it might be the most exciting one of them all.
Okay.
But in order to get there, we had to start here with the origins of the Czechoslovak legions and their actions in the First World War.
Okay, so that's actually really interesting. So I actually feel now that I'm really into this, I kind of want to do both parts in this one. So looks like that is a shorter episode as it is. Let's jump into the next video.
Part of their tale, of their formation as technically part of the French Foreign Legion, but in the field as battle units, eventually fighting for the Entente in the West, the East, and the South. However, that tale was by no means finished, and I'll continue it today, Czechoslovak Legions Part 2.
Let's go! Not gonna lie, it's funny because I feel like I'm watching like a History Channel type of thing with this.
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to a second Great War special episode about the Czechoslovak legions. When we left off, Russia was just about to officially leave the war. Although an armistice had been signed months earlier, the Brest-Litovsk Treaty was signed in March 1918. Ukraine had signed a separate peace a month earlier. This left the Russian Czechoslovak Legion in a pretty tough spot. See, in 1918, as we saw in Part 1, the 1st Czechoslovak Brigade and the Czechoslovak military forces would see heavy action on the Western and Italian fronts. Thomas Masaryk had by 1918 set up an autonomous Czechoslovak corps of over 40,000 men in Russia, and those guys very much wanted to go west and help in the fight, even with Russia out of the war. And after the Battle of Zborov in 1917, they had a heck of a good international reputation, but they were kind of trapped. They couldn't go west or south without running into enemies. It was also now too dangerous for them to go north to Murmansk and Archangel, so the only thing left to do was cross all of Russia, crossing Siberia and making their way to Vladivostok, and then going all the way around the world to France.
which is the thing about that is just, especially at this time when I'm pretty sure there's like no airplanes at this time, right? Or very little airplane production, if, like I said, if there's any airplanes. What I'm just thinking, because then they're gonna have to take a boat all the way to the U.S., travel from California or Alaska, wherever they're starting from, Alaska through Canada all the way to New York, then go all the way around. That's gonna take like what? How many months? Like at least 3 months. Because I mean, even if you take a train, connections, it's tough. Like I said, I'm pretty sure there's no airplanes at this time, so you're basically train or, I mean, that's pretty much the main source of travel at the time, train and boat. So that is insane. I mean, so they couldn't go like east, then go south through like India and all that? Because I'm just trying to think. How could they have saved time? You know, so if they can't go north, west, or south, and they weren't able to go east, at some point you feel like if you start going east, you could then start going south and go around that area, right? I mean, I would think, but maybe he might go into it, maybe. I don't know.
This they began to do. Masaryk and the men had gotten Bolshevik Ukrainian permission to cross Ukraine in February 1918, but there was a new wrinkle. The German army launched an offensive on the Eastern Front to force the Russian Bolshevik government to accept draconian peace terms. And that army, of course, did not want the Legion evacuated. This led to the Battle of Bakhmut in mid-March. The town was a major railway hub, and the Germans reached it March 8th. The Legion was in danger of being surrounded, and captured legionnaires were summarily executed by the Central Powers as traitors to Austria-Hungary, so it was a tough situation. Over the following 5 days, though, the Legion defeated 2 German divisions in bloody battle, and the Germans then negotiated a truce, which allowed for the legions to bring their armored trains through Bakhmut and onto Chelyabinsk. On their journey, the legions encountered many German and Austrian former prisoners of war who were heading east to their own lands to fight. This caused big tensions in general, but also because both sides needed the train tracks for their own use, so the going was slow. When the legions left Ukraine and entered Soviet Russia, they had to negotiate with the Bolshevik authorities there. This led to the Penza Agreement on March 25th, under which the legions were to give up most of their weapons in exchange for unmolested passage to the East Coast. It was actually Joseph Stalin who drafted the agreement. And as civilians, the legionnaires could carry some weapons for self-defense. Still, tensions were running incredibly high, since neither side trusted the other. The Bolsheviks suspected the Legion would join the White Russians in the Civil War. The Legion leadership was wary of the Czechoslovak communists, a part of the Bolsheviks in Russia.
Hold up. How old is this dude? Like, these two right here look young as hell. Maybe even this guy. They look like they're maybe like early teens. Like, they look young. Am I wrong? They also don't look very tall. They might even be kids, or at least this kid. He looks like he might be a kid. Jeez. I'm just saying, I mean, he just looks young. Like, young as...
maybe trying to subvert the men. They also figured the Central Powers were pressuring the Bolsheviks to stall them as much as possible. There was a shortage of locomotives. The railways themselves were often in terrible shape, and the legions had to negotiate with local Soviets committees again and again and again and again, and it all blew up in May. There was an incident in Chelyabinsk the 14th. The Legion was heading east, and former Hungarian POWs were heading west. A chunk of metal or stone thrown by a Hungarian either wounded or killed a legionnaire, sources differ. Some legionnaires then stopped the Hungarian train and apparently killed the perpetrator. This causes the local Soviet to arrest the legionnaires, which in turn causes the Legion, by now strung out the whole stretch of the Trans-Siberian Railway, to occupy Chelyabinsk and free those arrested who faced execution. So on May 21st, Leon Trotsky, after discussion with Lenin, gives the order to Russia to disarm or kill any member of the Czechoslovak Legion on sight.
Yo, it's funny how doing one stupid little thing can change the course of history, right? Just like, oh, he just threw a piece of rock or metal at someone. You know, like, just something so small like that just starts this whole big thing.
So the Legion was now at war with Soviet Russia and the Red Army, and fighting erupted at points all along the railway. The revolt of the legions lasted for the rest of the spring and summer. The legionnaires occupied numerous cities on the route eastward across Siberia, even as White Russians overthrew Bolshevik authority in local capitals like Omsk. By the end of June, the Whites controlled the railway from Lake Baikal to the Ural Mountains, and over the summer, Bolshevik power in Siberia was destroyed. The Bolsheviks had, however, executed the former Tsar and his family in Ekaterinburg less than a week before the Legion arrived and occupied that town. Side note, the Bolsheviks may have thought a rescue attempt was imminent, but I have no information that the Legion even knew that the Tsar and his family were there. Anyhow, when Kazan was captured August 5th, so was an imperial gold reserve. But by the beginning of the autumn, morale had dropped heavily among the legionnaires. The Red Army, growing ever stronger, had begun its counteroffensive, retaking Kazan in September. The legions had no reliable reinforcements and were not themselves growing in number. In any case, they were not even fighting the war they wished to fight. And when an independent Czechoslovakia was created October 28th, they wanted to simply go home. A coup in Omsk installed a dictatorship under Alexander Kolchak in charge of White Russia. And over the next year, the Legion guarded the railway, Kolchak's only real supply route, from partisan attacks. As 1919 wore on, though, Kolchak's armies retreated from the advancing Reds, and when Omsk fell in November, the White Army and thousands of refugees began the Great Siberian Ice March eastward. The legions then declared their neutrality, but when Kolchak was stranded on the railway and his bodyguard deserted, Allied representatives ordered the legion to get him to Vladivostok. Instead, they turned him over to the local government in Irkutsk. The Whites accused the legion of being traitors. In February 1920, Kolchak was executed by the Cheka, and the legion signed an armistice with the Red Army, which allowed unmolested passage to Vladivostok to finally go home. The first transport ship left already in December 1919, and the last in September 1920. In all, 67,630 people were evacuated on 36 ships. They took two main paths: the southern path, China, Hong Kong, Ceylon, Arabia, Egypt, and Trieste, or the journey around the world, Japan, the Pacific, Vancouver, or the Panama Canal, and across the Atlantic to Europe. And after that, they became the core of the Czechoslovakian army. And
okay, so they just stayed on the boat, which that would suck. I would have thought that, okay, so obviously Vancouver, but then I'm just trying to think. So obviously they go up to Vancouver and they could travel through, or I'm surprised they didn't try and go anywhere in the U.S. because on the West Coast you could either have gone to Washington, Oregon, anywhere in California. Obviously there's Mexico, but that's not part of the U.S. Obviously, clearly, and all that. Wait, I don't know. I'm just trying to think. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Those that made it home in time soon fought the Hungarians and the Poles, successfully defending the borders of their new nation, of which Thomas Masaryk became first president. Many of them became school teachers when not at war, oddly enough. A lot of monuments were built to the Legion, though the majority of them were destroyed in the Nazi occupation, and the communists weren't in any hurry to rebuild them. Since 1989 and the Velvet Revolution, though, some have been restored. Their legacy for their nation is a strong and proud one, and their tale, particularly those who served in Russia, a remarkable one. From small beginnings, by 1918, the Czechoslovak legions, on whichever front they served, were a large, valuable fighting force with an international reputation for excellence. The adventures across Russia and the Russian Civil War were a lot more complicated than I had time to cover today, and it is just a fabulous story of a bizarre and chaotic period of history, and you should very much look it up yourself to dig deeper. You will not regret it. We'd like to thank Jack Salthouse, Jakub Weberschinker, and the Czechoslovak Legion Association for helping us put this episode together.
So it's definitely interesting. So they did go through China, and yeah. I kind of want to go back and see where he said that they went through. Yeah, so China, Hong Kong, Ceylon, Arabia, Egypt, Trieste. Okay. So that's obviously the shorter route. So that's what I was thinking. It's like why did, when he originally said that, go around the world, I'm just like, why didn't they just go halfway, go down, go back west and go up, you know? So that's definitely really interesting. I realized how much of World War I don't actually know. I don't know why I can't think of what World War I was about. So that means, you know what? It's fine. I'm just going to have to react to a video on World War I now. Because I don't remember jack shit. I keep thinking World War II. Because, listen, like this part is where my dad has really screwed me up. Because when I'm talking about World War II, you know, I'm talking about, you know, everything that happened in Germany and with Hitler and you know, concentration camps, you know, all that stuff, and then Normandy and all that, and then there's also the Pacific side of the war. So we got bombed in World War II, and my dad's like, no, so all the European stuff that was World War I, that happened in World War I. I'm like, no, that's World War II. So it really starts me second guessing myself, because I tend to do that quite a bit. I start second guessing myself a lot. So, another thing is, so it's definitely really cool to see that they were able to that they made their own country and whatnot. But Czechoslovakia, didn't that get split again to make Slovakia and Czech Republic? I'm not sure, but I would love to visit Czech Republic and Slovakia. I will love to see some of these statue or monuments. I'm big on learning about history. Obviously, this is why I've been doing this series, learning about history and all that. And I just think that it's a lot of fun to learn about the past, because I feel like if you don't learn from the past, then your future is gonna look pretty grim. And so this has definitely been something fun to learn about. Something that I don't think a lot of people would actually know about. You know? Because for one, people would think that there's an issue with the title, so they might not click on it, because people might have heard of Czechoslovakia, but this literally just says Czechoslovak, so they might be like, mispronunciation. They didn't add the IA at the end, so what do they know? When in reality, what do we know? But this is definitely fun. Let me know some other historical stuff that you'd like me to react to next. Let me know in the comment section below. Subscribe for more content. There's going to be a lot of historical stuff coming as well as music and sports and everything. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.